Hello, my name is Skip, and this is From the Fourth Rows, best movies of the year so far, halfway through the year. And if I'm going to talk about the best movies of the year halfway through the year, one subject matter comes to mind, in my opinion, and that's midlife crisis. And I think there has been 5 or 6 really good movies this year about the midlife crisis, and it talks about, it shows us the times that we're going through, and that men and, somewhat women have these struggles in their lives. And way back in January, a movie that to me, I mean, is amazing. And I just want, I'm not going to talk about my top 10 list, but I'm going to say 5 movies that I believe are basically about that subject. And you can count them all as 5 or 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or whatever. And I'm going to say Company Men with Ben Affleck, Chris Cooper, Tommy Lee Jones, Kevin Costner. I mean, these are Oscar winners. All of these Oscar winners in this movie that hits home for a lot of people in a lot of states, in a lot of towns, in a lot of places in this country. It just happens to be Massachusetts. And what an amazing movie, and 4 amazing performances. And I really think this is one of the best movies of the year. Along that lines, I'm going to say another great movie is The Beaver. I mean, say what you want about Mel Gibson. He gives an amazing performance in The Beaver. Jodie Foster, a close friend, they worked together in a western a few years ago. And they do tremendous work with a few young and up and comers that I like a lot. Anton Yelchin as their son, and his wannabe girlfriend, played by Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence has got a few movies out this year and a big one coming out next year as Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games. But Mel Gibson decides he's gonna solve his problems through a puppet that he finds in the trash. And he gives us a little Cockney accent, and it helps him in his business, it helps him in his family, it helps him in his life. And I think, yeah, it's a kooky idea. A man solves his problems by talking through a beaver puppet. I mean, it is an amazing movie. I highly recommend you see The Beaver. My next movie on my list is Everything Must Go, another midlife crisis movie. A man gets fired from his job, gets thrown out of his house, all stuff gets thrown on his lawn. His wife takes a vacation, lets the man sort things out. He meets a little black kid, he helps him sell stuff. He meets a lady across the street, she's pregnant, her husband's out working, doing who knows what, and they become friends, so forth and whatnot. The cop, there's a cop, he shows up, and he wants to try to help him out. Colin Farrell, you think, well, Colin Farrell, he's a comedian. How is he going to be in these kinds of serious movies? Well, he is, and he does a good job. And he's very plausible as this character. And this role was originally offered to Jim Carrey, and I can see Jim Carrey doing this role. Will Ferrell does a phenomenal job. Now, my next midlife crisis movie is Win-Win. And I cannot say enough about Paul Giamatti and his performance in this movie. He is amazing. And this guy needs to win an Oscar. He is awesome in this movie. And it's about a lawyer, family man, struggling with his law business, and he has one client, and if he gets this one client, he can make enough money to keep his business going. Irony of all ironies, I guess you would say it. The guy's son shows up, and Paul Giamatti's character, he's a part-time wrestling coach. The old guy's grandson shows up, and the kid's a good wrestler. Wow, how about that? But it's not what you think. The kid's got problems. His mother's got problems. She isn't around. He leaves his mother in Ohio and comes and lives with his grandpa. Of course, he's got like Alzheimer's or whatever you call it. And so Paul Giamatti's character has to take care of him and deal with his estate and so forth and whatnot. But just great. Wonderful. It's just a wonderful movie. And Amy Ryan as his wife, as Paul Giamatti's wife, and Jeffrey Tambor, another underrated actor. What a good actor he is. I just love Win Win. I highly recommend people see Win Win. But I mean, back in July, just before the mid-year, Larry Crowne. What can I say about Larry Crowne? Tom Hanks, Julia Roberts, two heavy hitters, in Hollywood. They work together in Charlie Wilson's War. What a wonderful, wonderful movie about a real story, and severely overlooked by Oscar and everybody else. I just absolutely loved it. And in here, once again, Tom Hanks loses his job from a box company because he doesn't have a college education. Go figure. So he goes to get a college education. He meets a bunch of college students, and it changes his outlook on life, his clothes, and what he has to do to portray a better person, so forth and whatnot. The teacher, he gets along with the teacher right away. She didn't want to really be there until she starts talking to him and kind of being friends with him. Julia Roberts plays the teacher. He ends up in a scooter brigade. He sells his car, and he's trying to condense his finances and so forth and whatnot. I mean, just an amazing movie. And Tom Hanks hasn't directed a movie in 15 years. This is his first movie in 15 years he directed, and he stars in, and he produces it under his Playtone production company. What a great movie. Tom Hanks, when he wants to do something, it's usually good. Very rarely does him or Julia Roberts act in a movie or produce or direct or whatever that's not good. So that's kind of my midlife crisis group of movies that I think are some great movies and I really think people should see. But then we're going to go off to number 4. And number 4 is The Source Code. Now, The Source Code is about a man who is sent back in time to a train. Now, this train is going to be blown up. So he only has 8 minutes to figure out what's going on. And he keeps getting sent back in time and again. And on that train he meets, he's in the guise of her husband, so she doesn't realize it's not really her husband, but Michelle Monaghan's character, and they try to figure out what's going on, why this train is going to be blown up, and it's going to end up blowing up Chicago. And it's a secret military experiment why this man is sent back in time. And Jake Gyllenhaal, I mean, this could really kind of be a hokey, kind of goofy kind of plot and story, but he really sells it as important and thought-provoking, and he does a great job. So I really like Source Code. Now my number 3 movie is The Adjustment Bureau. And I mean, another movie with a lot of thinking involved. I mean, you have a man that's running for president, and he loses, and he ends up going into a bathroom. And that man is played by Matt Damon, and David Morse is his character. Matt Damon plays David Morse, and he ends up in a bathroom. And irony of all ironies, he meets a young lady named Elise in there, and she's played by Emily Blunt. And Emily Blunt is absolutely ravishing, amazing, gorgeous, name it. You name it. She is everything in this movie. But these two weren't meant to be together after this point. And there's a group of people, and they're called the Adjustment Bureau, if you will. You know, Men in Black, whatever. And they try to keep Elise and David apart. But Anthony Mackie's character, who is one of the Adjustment Bureau, messes up, and they end up getting on the same bus together. And this sets off a chain of events where they are being chased by the Adjustment Bureau, and John Slattery has to get involved, and then he gets Terrence Stamp involved. Now, Terrence Stamp, you may know as the voice of Jor-El in Smallville, and the villain in the Superman movies, Zod. What a great character actor Terrence Stamp is, and he really gets his due in this movie. It is at its heart a love story. It is probably the best love story you'll watch all year, but it's also one of the best movies. You know, when you watch movies, you want action, you want suspense, you want love, you want story, you want everything. There's so many things in this movie that make your mind want to think, and I absolutely love The Adjustment Bureau. Now, my number 2 movie is, you know, it's a little, it's a little interesting little movie. It's called Midnight in Paris, and it stars Owen Wilson and Rachel McAdams. And Owen Wilson plays Gil. Now, one night, you know, Gil and his wife are out, and he decides instead of getting a ride back, he's gonna walk. Well, he ends up on this corner, and he can't walk anymore. He gets a cab. Well, this cab, believe it or not, is a time machine in some sorts. It takes him back to the 1920s, Paris. And when they're on vacation in Paris, he meets Ernest Hemingway, Salvador Dali. I mean, some famous people back in those days, and he gets some inspiration because he's a writer, and he goes back to his room and he meets his wife, but he keeps doing this. I mean, Woody Allen is a great director. He hasn't directed a absolutely great movie in a long time. I guess you would call Annie Hall the great movie, but he's been making movies in and around Europe for about 10 or so years now, with, you know, Spain, Vicky Cristina, Barcelona, and some of the movies he's made in London over the years. You know, now he's making one in France. I cannot say enough about this movie. It is an amazing movie, and I love it. I love Midnight in Paris. But my number 1 movie of the year is, I know you're going to say, yeah, right, X-Men First Class. You know, you want to talk about first class? I want to say first class acting, first class story, first class everything. Matthew Vaughn, coming off of his last movie, Kick-Ass, does an amazing job with this. You're talking about Jennifer Lawrence, January Jones, you know, James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender. I mean, what a great young up-and-coming cast of stars. And the story in and of itself about mutants and Charles Xavier and Eric Lechner and so forth and whatnot. You have a real life backstory, and that's the Cuban Missile Crisis.